Three, two, one, and we're on for another Danny and Troy episode.
KO. Yep, that's what we've got.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for our listeners, it's been a program of ours for like the last 5 recordings to develop a theme, right? And you and I decided, for our listeners, that we're going to do a couple more. And the topic that we will be discussing this evening is in line with our conception of things that are necessary to establish an understanding among ourselves. And it's a little bit like a person who gains an interest in us and secondarily, I might add, what we do, because I think they have to relate to us first, thus ending our last session of relationships.
Exactly.
And we're going to be presenting this in like 5-bit segments, 1 bit every evening or so. Then when we get through with this session, or 5 sessions, which center around solutions, our thoughts about how we approach, maintain, keep solutions, discover them, and then utilize them, will be followed by the next session, probably another 5 segments, that deals with, for the time being, let's just call it emotional aspects, which can include a number of different activities on the part of a person that may not always be rational, logical, and involve things like, are we defensive? Are we assertive? And how each one of those approaches defines us and our future. I shy away very strongly from the word success, principally because when we speak about success, at least in this corner of the world and places that I go, most people, even though that's changing, equate success with financial assets. But there are many, many, many different, especially among what I don't like the terminology, but let's call us the common people, right?
Sure.
Who aren't necessarily common, but have been distinguished as such, principally because they are not necessarily filling a position that the larger superstructure demands. People who are willing, people who have some general direction, abilities to compromise, their own morality, which matches that of those who need them. Just to exhaust this theme, I'll mention it one more time. Something that I wrote and we talked about ad infinitum yesterday, which was, and I'll just quote it one more time. Can you be of service? And most people, I think, want to keep this in mind or let it emerge in their thinking, because that kind of like the backdrop on which we're developing ourselves. Can we be of service to those to whom we appeal? Isn't it necessarily a matter of our abilities and talents? It isn't, I beg your pardon, it isn't necessarily a matter of our abilities and talents, but do our appeals satisfy the needs of those to whom we seek to be of service?
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
every time I read that, that time I made a couple of mistakes, but every time I read it, it seems to become a bit more clear. And I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
But to launch this evening's inquiry, I'd like to call it, I suggest that we start with the idea of what to do with solutions.
Right.
And let me comment on that, and then I'll pass it over to you. Is that the idea of that came from my participation in global forums, Indian, Asian, United States, globally, with an organization called Horasis. And I often found that whatever panel it was I was on, we were quite active in offering a solution to a situation, or let's call it a problem, that the guy who was running the show thought might be of interest to listeners and participants. And I think for my part, I noticed that when we finished our panel discussions, we almost unanimously and almost every time came to a conclusion that solving problems of, like last time it was FANGs or something like that, or how do you deal with territorial integrity to keep the internet running out of Asia. And, my comment on that one was, well, why don't we ever speak about Russia? Because Russia's part of Asia. And I think I got my knuckles rapped by the nun in the room about certain things we don't want to talk about. But I would like to be a little bit more inclusive, because I think solutions are not only, let's say, answers or approaches, but they cannot restrict, from my way of thinking, they cannot restrict or exclude people like they're doing now, since I mentioned Russia, right? It's like ignoring people who are part of the world, but when I was a kid, we grew up doing this. La 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 la. You don't want to hear it. You don't want to acknowledge anything that's going on. You just, shut down and just keep going on. That's not, to my way of thinking, a good methodology for not only providing a solution, but also what do you do with one once you arrive at it? Because these panels, active discussion, people talking, offering different ideas, and then coming up with, well, here's the best way of dealing with it.
That's right.
And then that's it. Then it just dissipates like smoke, where even though the panel members often commented on it, it's like, we need to be together and we need more time and we need a method by which to activate our solutions.
Sure.
And that was our decision, based on excluding as many distractions as possible, when there were heaps of them, and coming up with excuses about why we can't do it, and explanations about what our limitations are, and ad infinitum. And I found that seems to be rather common in the world of business, at least from my point of view, where people say, well, I'll tell you, you know what you need to do. And then nobody does it. Because why? Because it's not clear enough, because I'm not being compensated for it, which is kind of what we're doing. We're developing themes around which to establish understanding, not only between you and me, but with prospective clients and people who may be interested in what we have to say, and form a basis of establishing a relationship. And so, to paraphrase it, even though we may have come up with the solution, it fell dead.
Sure.
At that point in time, partially because we never assembled with the idea in mind that if and when we came up with the solution, that there would be a structure by which that solution would be implemented. And I do believe that that is a all too common problem. And I thought it was worthy of a discussion. And why it never seems to go anywhere, or very seldom goes somewhere. There has to be something in the inspiration part, things we talked about, the objectivity of the object of our interest, et cetera,
Right.
that if we're not going to do anything about it, why bother? So I can feel good about, oh, look at me, I came up with a solution. It's like, and what? What then?
Exactly.
And so I pass that over to you for your own comments, and feel free, of course, to tackle mine if you wish. And
Sure.
let's see what kind of resolution we can reach on, if you believe it's a problem, and what you think we and people could, should, would do about it.
Yeah, so we'll firstly to talk about the issue. I mean, I think there's two sides or two angles, not sides particularly, but the angles that you mentioned that I heard around coming up with the problem, but then doing nothing. Oh, sorry, talking about a problem, coming up with a solution, and then doing nothing. The first instance angle that you mentioned was that some people don't want to hear the solution. Like, okay, let's talk about your case with the global forum that you are on, where they said, no, you're not allowed to talk about that. And yeah, it was like they didn't want to hear anything to do with a solution that to do with that particular topic. And that, I mean, is just really, I don't know, I mean, that's the way the world is, but it's just stifling so many solutions because they're not looking for varying opinions. You can't, it seems in these particular, so this is like World Economic Forum influenced based conferences that say, okay, this is the narrative we're on and this is what we got to stick to, and these are the topics and solutions that are inside that narrative that we will be willing to discuss, and anything outside of that you get kicked off and then banned from the conference, which is.
Are we talking about political correctness? Is that what you're suggesting? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, politically correct. I mean, I'd shy away from those words because, I mean, there's so much baggage with them. It's kind of, I guess, an oxymoron in some cases where the politics behind it says, I mean, yeah, this is what is correct, but really it's just to make a few members of that narrative or society richer. And yeah, from what I can see, in my opinion, it really is deep and in some cases sinister of that. It's not, and really powerful influences that say you're not allowed to talk about this. And let's go with Russia and Ukraine. And I'm not an expert in geopolitical issues, and what for one, I think war is terrible, and what's happening, nobody should be suffering. But I have seen that people are coming up with the solutions, a peaceful resolution, and saying, okay, what needs to happen is, okay, NATO needs to pull out. Ukraine needs to present themselves in this way and say, okay, yes, we're not going to be doing biological labs development and the border is going to be neutral, or as a nation, Ukraine will remain as a neutral country. And that will, according to some experts that I've been reading about and hearing about, end or possibly end in a peaceful resolution. But it's not being considered as a solution. And in some ways, those people that were presenting it are being cancelled, or saying, hey, you can't come to the forum.
Disappeared.
You can't come to the forum anymore, and you're banned. And now, that solution, even though it seems like a reasonable and best solution, gets stifled, gets stopped, gets stomped on. And that is the first aspect that, to overcome that. I'm not sure what the solution is, other than, what we're attempting to do is build up our own narrative, our own small community, even though you and I are just two people at this point, but to be open and talk about the things that we feel are important to talk about, and see who else, resonates with that, and provide services to those who we appeal to. If we can get past that, which is what we're doing now, but okay, we're not going to be in the context of the forum and have that, I guess, community or group, but we have each other, we have this, and this is what we're doing to provide an alternative to that kind of mainstream environment. It's mainstream, but it's on the wrong track. It seems like, it's on a certain track that doesn't want to shift and doesn't want to hear about solutions that are outside their little square of, okay, this is what we're allowed, or this is what we're permitting people to come up with solutions in this box. If you come out with no, you're not allowed. So then, given that is, okay, we have a solution, but let's take action towards it. And this is where, even whether we're inside or outside that box, and a solution is put forward, is there any activity or action taken towards it, even if everybody agrees, oh yeah, that's the best solution, and or in that particular context, these solutions just say, well, yeah, that's a good one, somebody should take action on that, and that's what everybody says, yeah, somebody should do that, but nobody actually does. So it's not the responsibility, or isn't nobody remains accountable for actually actuating the possible solution. And like you mentioned, who wants to take on that responsibility? Are they getting compensated for it? And that, I think, is a major issue of why things aren't executed.
I had a university class one time. I think it was technology and society or something like that.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun. And I did it semester after semester, or quarter after quarter. And I had one requirement outside of attendance and participation in the class.
Mm.
And that was that by the end of that class, as a final examination, everybody in the class that wanted a grade had to invent something.
Right.
And the responses were multifarious. I mean, it boggled your mind,
Sure.
but I think more importantly, it boggled the students' minds as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
From a guy, I think he was a special ops American, who principally took a section out of an inner tube, as you could stretch a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and cover the scope of his rifle, because from what he told me, the most often event that discloses an operation officer's presence is the reflection of light off of the glass in the scope.
Okay.
And he thought and he thought and he thought, and he said, well, I just cut an inner tube and pulled it over the scope.
Right.
And when when it wasn't using it, and then of course there are lens caps and things like that, but this seemed to suit his purposes very well.
Yeah.
There was another guy who used some kind of device by the interstate that created electricity, which simply, I think, by the wind created by passing cars, not so much, for solar cells or things like that.
Mm-hmm,
There was a girl who, I remember her especially because she freaked out. And I was so proud of her. She came in with some soap that she had made herself from her grandmother's recipe, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And actually, those people were doing something. They weren't just, as like my friend in San Francisco says, they weren't just butts in seats.
Sure.
That's how they referred it to students, right?
Right.
BIS. So I was very proud that these people had actually taken action, because I had forced them in a way, right, to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things you said were quite interesting. I made a couple of notes about how we seem to be set up in a way that I feel that, the areas of freedom in which I'm still exploring are being controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make any sense to me. We've got a world that needs inventions, it needs creative people, it needs applications, it needs, applications of those ideas, because without them, then you're just swimming in a pool, an alphabet soup pool,
Right.
and nothing ever goes anywhere. This this panel discussion, I think, was just which I had to pay for, right, was that it was antithetical to solution application.
Mm-hmm.
They actually, it was my observation, were working against anybody doing anything about it. But it was
Right.
sort of like a shadow play in which, people are, and we're in
Right.
India now and blah, blah, blah. And it's all just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right. And,
Mhm.
and nothing ever happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the the open-mindedness that it seemed to solicit from people
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was overridden by issues of control, as I mentioned, and also diminishing returns.
Right.
We ended up spending money, time. I mean, I can't tell you the trouble I went through to prepare an approach to things. And I had, as usual, I spend that much time on something, I can predict the future because I'm putting two and two together. And so what I wanted to know was what was the motivation behind FANGs forming in the first place.
Sure.
But it seemed to go against the grain of Davos. And I was pretty much, cut off at the knees because and I didn't even get to make my presentation on this last one because, I had brought up a sensitive subject that sort of whitewashed Switzerland's neutrality. I suppose they were going to shift it all over to the Ukraine, right? But the subject never got discussed because one of the panel members thought I had made a political statement, but it wasn't. It said, we have a clash of mentalities, which I think to a large extent also keeps out the idea that these panels and their approach was, I want to say something like too big to implement. Is you come up with a solution, but nobody on the team is an activist. So it was an exercise in futility.
Sure.
And for what? Today I have no idea. I mean, why are we doing this? I was saying to myself, because nobody wants to do anything about it. And I think when you define a solution, that the largest part of that solution is the person or persons who take the bull by the horns. And that's a hit or miss proposition. You don't know, first of all, that there is anybody there that has time out of being, a university professor or, a banker or whoever's on the panel to actually do anything about it.
Exactly.
But I have a global reputation of coming up with solutions. And then people think, well, it sounds so simple, which it should. They can do it themselves.
Okay.
But they're never able to, partially because I think the green-eyed monster shows up and they want everybody to think it's their idea, but they can't successfully implement it. And I think that comes into our next series of the emotional aspects, which include things like greed. And you hear an idea, and I know people who got rich stealing other people's ideas because they weren't patented. So they walk onto a job site and they say, aha, I see. You got a patent on that? You got to watch those people with questions, right? And no, and then you run off to your lawyer and, you get out a piece of paper and a pencil and you say, well, this is what we're doing. And then you go around everybody else and limit their own process, which is already working, right? And quite successful at what it's programmed or built to do. And you want to come in and pick people's pockets. So I think, what I believe I'm describing is, and we can include this in our section on emotions, and we can also include morality.
Yes.
Right?
Sure.
Hey, Troy, this has been great. 5 years together. And now, you gave me an idea and I sold something and cut you out of the picture. Right? And then it's like, thanks, sucker. Right? And that doesn't seem to serve anyone except, and not even myself, if I were to do something like that, which I wouldn't. But, it's delusions. You can add that one to it too. And, where we get these ideas of how to be successful or whatever.
Right.
And there is so much going on behind the scenes. Like yesterday, after our discussion, I happened on a presentation on YouTube by a plastic surgeon who was talking about Elon Musk and his hair. And
Okay.
he was saying, and also not just Elon Musk, but Tom Cruise as well. And he was taking photographs of every year. And he was, about Cruise, where you put the Botox, and then you got to do this, and you got these little hollows here you got to take care of,
Mhm.
and his hairline, da da da. And Musk was like, very thin hair up here. And you look at him today, and it's like,
Right.
hey, look, I got a mane of hair. And he was saying, okay, that took about 10,000 implementations, obviously, of like follicles or however they do it,
Right.
so that he ends up making the proper image of
Right.
himself,
Right.
So you never know. If I hadn't run across that article, that presentation, I never would have thought I never would have made that analysis.
Sure.
Right. And
Mhm.
so there's so much happening behind the scenes, Troy.
Mhm.
It seems like panels end up being renamed for discussion purposes
Sure.
only. Right.
Yeah.
And if you do come up with an idea, you can tell me, but get back to your work.
Mhm.
And if you got some extra time, I want you to dust the erasers.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a tough nut to crack, if it's crackable at all.
Sure. Well, I think it comes back, for me anyway, it comes back to kind of the first topic of, well, I guess the first series actually of motivation, like consciousness process in order to objectivity, set some goals. But it's got to be, I think, coming from an inner place, that voice that we were talking about, that sometimes can be very misguiding, but on the flip side can really have some great insight and inspiration and motivation. And if I can, as an individual, get on that track, I know this is right, it just feels right, it's great, there are so many solutions that, for one, that I can see, since we're talking about Russia and Ukraine, I information comes into to my stream of consciousness, and I go, oh yeah, that's a great solution. But I don't do anything about it. And it's not that I don't want it to happen. It's just that I guess I do have my own drive, my own inspiration. And of course, if things come in line with what I'm doing, if there's a way I see I can help that situation by achieving my own desires, my own goals, my own objectives that I've set for myself on a personal, individual sense, then yeah, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm going to just sidestep that. But I've got my own objectives, to go back to that word. And I think in some ways, if we can all be on a path that is inspired by this universal consciousness, or that we can get in touch with and remain in touch with, then we are going to be, like you're talking about, not screwing people over, and there'll possibly be a space where we don't need to get lawyers involved and say, this is my idea, and everybody pay me because I'm the one who signed the piece of paper first. And yeah, I think that can all be eradicated if we take our approach through that process of consciousness, awareness, and objectivity, goal setting, motivation, and achievement in a way that supports that individual, I guess, inner drive that can so easily be put off track. And this is what, we see so many examples, and what we're talking about is that people are, I guess, driven by motivations that are a little bit off track.
Off track to whom? The overall process of being fair and getting things done and all that?
Yeah. It's off track in terms of this ultimate consciousness of why we're here and what the purpose is, and ultimately being able to achieve in a way that is, I guess, self-sufficient but sustainable by a community, starting with number one, me, the individual, and then those that find the services appealing, that say, yeah, I can join in on that.
I made a comment today online about, I think it was a speech that Lavrov was giving in an interview. And I realized, not about Lavrov, but I realized that there's so much talk about peace. Mm-hmm. And it's like, can we not talk about peace, because it's nothing but flapping your gums.
Okay.
And it's not, and I think I can rely on Nietzsche for some help on this one.
Sure.
Is that if peace were attainable, we would have it.
Okay.
That what we should be focusing on, and I'm going to get criticized from today until the end of my life for saying this, but people are not believers in peace. I think they, just the emotional creature doesn't have a peaceful reaction. I mean, they've been beaten to death with the Bible and the cross and every other religious book saying to people, be peaceful. Mm-hmm. And why would you tell people that they have to be peaceful when it's against their nature? I would say, okay, let's approach the matter by addressing your warlike nature and go from there, as opposed to saying, take an abstract like sex. You can't have sex until you're married. And it's like, okay, can we have a show of hands of how many people in this room of 1,000 abide by that? Mm-hmm. Because, the human instinct, the drives, the animal in us demands, I'm thirsty, I need to drink. And what are you going to do? Just go ahead and dry up because even though the water's there, it's not right.
Right.
And I think we're just approaching it from the wrong point of view. Like with the example of the panel, right? What we needed to talk about, we weren't allowed. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I wasn't allowed. Mm-hmm. And then a panel member made a gross assumption. I never mentioned, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I was talking about mindsets.
Sure.
Two different ways of looking at things to explain why fangs form and what's next. Mm-hmm. That was my approach, mm-hmm. Right? And I think I came up with some pretty good answers that I never got to voice. Mm-hmm. But without the correct approach to examining the problem, dealing with the problem, and I'm not without influence in that area. Mm-hmm. And quite often when I say something, it happens on the global forum stage. And I'm really flattered. I'm really surprised more often than not, that what I'm proposing as a solution, people are talking about it. but it only goes a step or two, and then it goes into the shadows, right? It goes underground.
Right.
Whether or not, my comments to people changes political approach or whatever, I don't know. I can't take credit for that because nobody's coming back to me and saying, thanks, Danny, that was really helpful, right? But the idea that is being undermined is the approach that we should. It's like what was it Nietzsche said, that the uninteresting life is not worth living.
Okay.
So yeah, so if thanks a lot. There's a fly in the room. Somebody take care of that, will you? It is nothing more than just hegemony, which of course is the American foreign policy, right? To control the whole world because we know everybody wants to live like we do. Have crap from Walmart in your front yard until the sun bleaches it, and then you push it out by the road so the trash people can take it away.
Right.
Wow, the American way of life, whatever the hell that's supposed to be.
Mhm.
Because I think I'm living the American way of life, but it's ineffectual. I mean, it's like most people I know and talk to don't believe that the elections were legitimate. And most people are saying, why do I need to vote?
Right.
They're going to decide whatever they want to do anyway.
Sure.
Or they want comments, whether I go to the doctor or, I buy something on Amazon. I want to know what I thought about it. And it's like, you want to pay me for that? No. Why should I do it? Why should I promote your product? That's what I do for a living, right? I make you famous. If you cooperate, you can go your own way. You can let me design your restaurant on California Street, and then you take the design and try to do it yourself out of airplane glue and spit. And that's what it ends up looking like. So there's so many failings of people's understanding of what the British would love to call fair play.
Okay.
And why the IRA and the Brits never came to a conclusion, because the British said, why can't we operate according to rules of fair play? And the Irish said, how do you define fair play? Because it makes sense to the British, but they're not explaining it or discussing it with people from different origins or different persuasions, right? About what to do about it. So it all seems like we're just treading water.
Right.
And we have the least courageous approach to solving these problems. And I don't think war is courageous.
No.
The more courageous would be the more difficult.
Sure.
Not pick up a gun and shoot somebody you don't know. Have a conversation with them first. When the First World War, they had ceasefire around Christmas time. Oh, by all reports, one side got together with the other side. They had a grand old time. And then, the next day they go back trying to kill each other.
Exactly.
Why? We had a surplus population of poets and, and artistic people we needed to send to France to die in the trenches. It's ridiculous. This human waste.
Right.
And I just think that the mood of the planet of people who, the ones who, pardon my French, but they say shit floats, right? So all these people at the top that have floated to the top really, and I know a few of them, aren't worthy of their position and their influence and their commands. And this finger on both hands should be cut off.
Okay.
Of those people, right? Then they would end up using this finger, right? Which they do anyway. It's sort of like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's important when we're looking for solutions. We want the easy way out, right? Let's take the easy way out. Everybody agree? Yep. Can we go home now? Oh, we got lunch coming. And it's just, it's courageous, a lack of courage. Right?
Right.
And how do you, I suppose, way back when the Greeks were talking to each other, I mean, courage was different. It's like when I remember when I first got out into the world, I was the first guy when somebody's car stalled and was holding up traffic. I
Yeah.
put on my blinkers,
Right.
park behind them, push the car out of the way, and keep traffic going again.
Right.
But everybody else was like,
Yeah.
get out of the way. And it's like, oh, that's really helpful.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it just takes, and I'm finding this every birthday, where it kind of gets to the point where what's happening to me now, even though it may not seem apparent, is I slow down a little bit because I make better decisions if I'm actually trying to get something done than trying to, maintain that youthful vigor that I don't
Right.
seem to be able to shake. Right. And people are saying, when are you going to slow down? It's like, when I slow down. But I think that these are the difficult areas of making decisions, solutions, go forth, young man, go do something, take the bull by the horns, which is now nothing more than just cheap advertising.
Right.
Buy this lawnmower, take the bull by the horns. It's like, oh, really? If I buy this lawnmower, I'm taking the bull by the horns? Can somebody explain that to me? Or is it just another way of making me feel like if I'm driving a lawnmower, I'm a real man. Maybe I'll put a beer in this hand and I drive the lawnmower with this hand. It's like, okay, you made it. You're a man now. But wouldn't you know it, damn it, there's a woman that's took my place. Hey, Troy. What do we do? How do we solve this problem?
Well, yeah, I don't think we can or should try to solve it right now. I'm sure we will be able to come up with a solution, but I think what we're talking about is still the problem, and defining the situation. That's probably the first step of any solutions. Okay, what's the situation? And the two interesting points that come to my mind, I guess, in summary, one is free will and two is courage. So free will, sometimes we think we have free will, but we see an ad on TV and says, hey, you need a new lawnmower. And I go, yeah, I do need a new lawnmower, but it's not really free will. It's being controlled and kind of manipulated and induced. And if you sat in the space, okay, what do I really need in my life and what's important, and then really come from a space of free will, then you'll find you have a lot of options that are outside of this box that, people, if you want to promote that an outsider, then you're going to get banned, you're going to get canceled, you're going to get disappear. But you do have free will. I believe every individual that's alive has free will. Execution of that free will is another thing, and sometimes it takes courage to take a certain step. And if you are courageous enough, it's going to, well, for me anyway, it's more exciting to take more courageous approaches and see what happens and explore. And why I take courageous steps is due to curiosity and my own aspect of wanting to explore. But those that aren't courageous, even though they'll have free will kind of toe the line and sit back and see what happens. But on the flip side, I see you can't be too courageous. I mean, you can be too courageous, but it might end in I don't know, the worst possible scenario would be you no longer living. If you're too courageous, and I don't,
So what?
yeah,
So what? Because you did whatever you did to fulfill your own ambitions.
that's right.
And I think people put life is miserable. They're going to create a war so we can reduce the surplus population.
Right.
And so what? You're going to get
Sure.
killed anyway,
Sure.
or you know, dementia is going to hit you, but from the fluids we drink out of bottles that kill us, or chemtrails, or God knows whatever's going on, right? We're like human guinea pigs.
Sure.
But it's kind of interesting, Troy. Which I think we're going to have to talk about that before it's over as well.
Hmm.
The whole idea. They say that heroes are either stupid or courageous, right?
Right.
But I think I see it no different than me coming down that bridge and seeing that car stopped in the left-hand lane and getting out of my car to move it. I don't think about personal safety. I don't think about everybody else, which is, you know, you can't do that because somebody's going to get offended. It's like, oh God, you know, no, it's like I have some objectivity about this, and it doesn't include me throwing up my hands because I'm afraid somebody's not going to like what I do. I'm going to do it anyway. And you know what? The Irish believe, or the Celts believe, that the distance between this life and the next is the breadth of a hair.
Point.
Which kind of, you know, goes to my preaching about, you know, that there is no death. It's just a change of states. And we go back, you know, 1,000 years or so to Celtic civilization. And these guys who painted themselves with lime, you know, and went naked into battle. I mean, have you ever thought about it? You're going to your death. And you either go to your death like, oh no, or you go to your death with, yeah, let's go. One or the other. It's your choice. Exactly. And it's not a matter of, you know, them taking a picture of you to Uncle Sam needs you, join the military, right? And end your worthless life. And we'll give you $50,000, by the way, and then tax it. So we'll make money on that. But I think actually this could be, if you're finished, I can finish this up session by saying, leading into the next one, which I think is a very interesting next step, which I consider it like in sailing, where we right the keel. You know, the boat's on its side. The keel is meant to keep the boat upright partially, right? And it's usually pretty damn heavy. And that's what we need to do now, is we need to figure out a way without buying into anybody else's program and without instruction. You know, we can principally say, this is how we feel about the situation. And if you agree with us and it's helped you in some manner, then we're happy about that.
Exactly.
And, you know, it'll also help us as we continue our life on, speaking from a guy whose birthday, it's his birthday, right? Or what do we do now is next year. It's like, I don't know, get older. And try to figure out, you know, before the lights go out, what was this all about? And what good is it going to do me from here?
Exactly.
Right. Because I do believe that, you know, it's just like I said, the breadth of a hair. And if you do take something with you, that other people are mourning over the carcass, you know, the vehicle that no longer will crank.
Right.
And you know, the juice is already gone. Right. Exactly. I mean, you can jump it a time or two and hope that, you know, it gets you where you're going, but the air conditioner isn't working, the windows won't roll down, you know, the power steering pump is going out. And it's all about our explanation. And I think it's our, forgive the use of the word, duty to be as courageous as possible, or as truthful, or as honest, or as forthright, whatever substitute word you want to use for is searching for that feeling that we feel comfortable enough with to say, that's the word we want to use. And so, there are other, of course, actions to be taken after we find a solution.
Mhm,
Okay, we're going to
mhm.
use a boat, right? But the
Mhm.
boat's on its side. We're the boat, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And how do we right it? How do we get it sitting properly in the water?
Exactly.
Well, we'll talk about that next time. How do we do that with ourselves? And I think we just provide personal examples,
Mm.
not to say, to people who may be listening, I'll tell you what your problem is. It's like, yeah, my problem is you. It's like, stay out of my life, you know. But I think the world is full of conflict, and I don't think that, peace is the answer, is any kind of answer at all. It's kind of like a double entendre. You just keep people hoping for peace, or what is it they say? I learned this in college. Fighting for peace is like screwing for virginity.
Right.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Great.
You can
Yeah.
wind it up, Troy.
I think, yeah, I don't want to add to it. I'd love, let's end on that. And
Yeah, that's good enough.
yeah.
Okay,
And,
good enough.
yeah,
Well, then tomorrow we'll find out how to write the Keitel.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
great.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Thank you, brother. Okay,
Take care, Danny.
see you tomorrow.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Troy.